topic, giving me my 2 cents. I'm getting a little distracted, but I started working on something about a week ago, and as you can see, I've been following this guy's channel for a while, right? And he's doing this, right? Neanderthals were a completely different species from humans, right? So, literally, this is the reason why I started my 2 cent and why I rebranded the channel, because I don't know exactly what he's saying, but I'm assuming he's saying the same thing that European rhetoric always says, that uh, humans. So basically, in science there's evolution theory and there's creation theory. Well, in science there's evolution theory. Outside of science is creation theory. So the basic premise is that either God created the heavens and the earth, and everything in the Bible is inaccurate account of what occurred in the past, or human beings evolved from higher order primates into who we are today. So if you follow taxonomy loosely, every species, there's the order, phylum, genus, species in different orders, right? Here's the thing that gets lost in translation for the average person. Every species every animal is a species, right? So some animals are classified as the ancestor, right? So like the squirrels that are running around in your front yard are a species, right? But they are okay. Here's a perfect example. Alligators are said to have not evolved for millions of years, right? So alligators are the ancestral descendant of some reptiles, right? Sharks have not evolved for so many millions of years, right? So some sharks are the ancestral descendant of some shark-like fish, right? Sharks themselves are their own species, but the species shark is a higher order species of other species that are considered to be genetically younger than other sharks, right? So this is the thing that gets lost in translation when you're dealing with taxonomy on a day-to-day level, right? So um, basically what happens with humans is we we don't see any other organism like ourselves on the planet except for us, right? That means that every primate, right, every monkey or every ape or orangutan is considered the ancestral parent of the descendant of Homo sapien, right? So somewhere between monkeys and modern humans, as I like to say, modern humans, we believe, or it's taught by science, that humans evolved from apes and primates and all that stuff. That's not the way that the system works for the Michelson standard. The way that it works for me, what makes most sense to me based on principles of evolution and science. There's one fundamental flaw that every person, predominantly Europeans, make when it comes to the idea of the evolution of Homo sapiens as a species. And nice to meet you, Dinosaur. And what that mistake is that a species has to interbreed with itself, right? That means that if two members of a species can produce a fertile genetic offspring, they are by definition the same species, right? You can't take a cat and a dog and have them breed. They can engage in the act, but they can't produce a fertile offspring. That makes them different species, right? So what is being done in anthropology and I think anthropology and archaeology, that should be human history and the study of human remains. What has been done in those two disciplines is the idea that ancestral hominids were a different species that interbred to give rise to Homo sapien. My premise is that Europeans have a certain level of bias and they want Caucasians to be of a different ancestral branch than Africans and Asians and the Alcapopians. Well, I got to figure out how to pronounce that word. But there's a word that I define in my 2 cent that's used for islanders. So there's four within the my 2 cent standard. There's four basic races: islanders, Negroid Africans, Caucasian Europeans, and Mongolian Asians. That's just the super highest level of defining the one human species, Homo sapien. Africans, Homo sapiens, have 99 point, well, Africans, Homo sapiens, have 100% human DNA, right? All the other ethnicities on the planet, there's only like three genetic branches that have been discovered. There probably are more genetic branches, but you can't find genetics and bones, right? Like it's hard to find bones that are hundreds of thousands of years old and find genetic information to actually use to define our ancestors based on actual genetic material, actual organic matter that can be measured in a meaningful way, opposed to what fossils are, which is predominantly minerals that have calcified around what used to be an organic substrate. So, keeping all that in mind, there's basically only three genetic races that exist, and the combination of those three genetic races give rise to the four visual people that we can see, right? If you put four people in front of you, you can say that guy's an African, that guy's a Caucasian, that guy's an Asian, and that guy looks like he's from one of the many islands on the country. It don't even matter if, and this is the cool thing about the idea of islanders being their own race, because it actually comes from the fact that Darwinism exists, because when you look at the history of taxonomy, the only reason why he was able to prove taxonomy is because he went to the islands of Mongolia and he was able to see evolution within hundreds of thousands of miles, because for some reason isolated organisms evolve more rapidly than we do when we're spread out across the earth, and that means that there's more genetic diversity on an island, which is a smaller region of the planet, than there is on a large continental scale. So the diversity that you see in evolution on an island is exponentially greater than the evolution that you would see outside the island. And for me, evolution and mutation are basically the same thing. Some things mutate and they gain, the ability to absorb sunlight and fly around like Kryptonians, or they unfortunately get sickle cell, which, ironically enough, was an evolution that allows organisms in desert-like environments to retain more water and preserve water better. But it became a deficiency in other parts of the world when it mixed with other genes that kind of mucked up the advantage that it gave. So mutation is just that, and the ability to pass genes and heredity is just that. The best evidence for evolution is the fact that two random people, male and female, that have no connection, no backgrounds, no nothing, come together and produce an offspring that looks just like them. And that is true for every organism, for cats, dogs, chickens, birds, everything. So that in of itself shows that the validity of evolution carries some weight, right? What I believe personally is that during the colonial expansion of Europeans, the bias of them defining themselves as the superior race, right? They want to make themselves the ancestral parents of everybody, right? They want to be mother and father genetic material, but nature doesn't care about what you think. Doesn't care, right? Africans have been shown to be the ancestral parents of every other life form on the planet. By definition, everybody on this planet are Africans. It's a simple and elegant understanding. Culture's different. Your nationality, you're European, you're German, you're Russian, whatever, all that stuff is fine. But genetically, we're all Africans, right? So the Neanderthal makes up the predominant genetic material of modern Europeans. So they look at that and they say, oh, that's evidence that we have a different lineage than the Africans. No, you are a divergent genetic material from the African. That's the reason why that little bit of percentage of difference that you have can still produce fertile offspring with the 100% Homo sapien gene. The Neanderthal gene is just those Africans that migrated out of Africa and had dark skin and nappy hair living in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before vitamin D deficiency and geographical changes of the climate caused the skin to get lighter. On top of just the fact that, hey, I think that I like girls that are lighter skinned, and hey, I think I like guys that are lighter skinned. So sexual selection played a large part in shaping Europeans into predominantly light-skinned, blonde, and blue-eyed individuals, as we say today, right? Because the thing that's most fascinating to me, if you look at like the idea of race, long hair, which we associate with Caucasians, is actually an Asian trait. Like people with the longest hair on the planet, the long, straight, silky hair is an inherently Asian trait. For some reason we think of Europeans as this idea. And curly hair, what we associate with Africans, that's definitely a inherently European trait. Like Europeans predominantly, if you don't if they don't do any work to straighten their hair out, naturally their hair is very, 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 very curly, right? Like it's not necessarily nappy, but it's definitely more curly than anything else. This video that he's putting out is basically a thesis to show evidence that Europeans are the ancestral parents of humanity, and it further justifies why it's acceptable that Europeans went around the planet and brought humanity to humans. But if you were the children, then you just went around the planet and taught everybody what your parents taught you. Like you don't get the. It's like the youngest child is trying to be the firstborn. It's like everything the youngest child learned from the firstborn. He's like trying to give it to the firstborn, and he was first, and it's like, but you weren't. Like, but you wasn't first. Like I was here before you. Like, and that's and on a cultural, national, ethnical level, that's what's going on, and it's just kind of counterproductive. And the only negative about it is when you try to use it, which a lot of channels like this one, I don't know what he's saying. I have to actually watch the video. I'm not trying to be biased, but I've seen this rhetoric for 42. I've seen this rhetoric all my life. It's getting better, but it's still prominent, But the only problem is that when you try to justify the atrocities that Europeans are guilty of by saying, well, we were a little bit more superior, and if we wouldn't have did the atrocious things that we did, then we wouldn't have modern society. And it's like, I don't think that you can get I don't think you get greatness from horribleness. Like, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think murdering and killing is why we have stable societies. Like, I think the Great Wall of China was built because the Chinese was trying to protect themselves from the Mongolians. I don't think that the war was what allowed them to build the technology. It was necessitated, right? Because the Mongols and the Asian plain had just as right to the resources of the region as the settlers. They were the same culture. They were the same nation. They were the same people. They just had different perceptions on how we should do it. The Emperor of China was like, we need to settle down and farm. And Genghis Khan was like, we need to ride horses and migrate all over the planet and be free and chase animals and sustain ourselves that way. Makes sense because this is what nature does. Nature doesn't settle. It constantly moves around. Why would you want to put all of the cattle in a box and have them graze in the same land over and over again until they deplete the resource? Like, nature has already given us these rhythms. So they had conflict of interest. And then Emperor China was like, you, peasant, when you're done farming, build a wall. And the peasant's like, I don't want to build a wall. And then Emperor China used force to force them to build a wall. And then when they're like, I don't want to build a wall, Genghis Khan come in, steal all their crap. They go to the emperor like, he stole all our crap. The emperor's like, I told you to build a wall. You can either build a wall or you can fight him when he comes take your stuff. Those are your options, right? That's the way history actually works. This idea that the things that took place in the past can justify the advantages we have in the present is counterproductive, because the things we have in the present were necessitated by necessity. So there's a whole bunch of information that has to be put out. I'm in the process of actually compiling it all into an actual book. And between life and school and running like a crazy person every 3 days and just getting things organized, I'll put it out. But I figured since he's doing the same exact thing that I'm doing, like, I literally have been structuring my thesis on this last week. I just randomly had the idea to just bring it back from the dead. So because I see human evolution as a divergent branch. Humanity, in my opinion, hominids evolved parallel to simians. And the reason why we don't see, so basically, when I was using the analogy of the alligators and the sharks, the reason why we don't see a lot of lesser humans running around on the planet is because Homo sapiens wiped them all out. Any hominid species that was divergent from us, that would have diverged into its own unique isolated species, when it was parallel to us, we wiped them out. So if you couldn't breed with Homo sapien as Homo sapien evolved through time, if you weren't able to produce a fertile offspring, you were wiped out. War would take place and your numbers would be completely depleted. So that divergent evolution from different species never occurred. The reason why there's such a diversity of primates is because primates wasn't as intelligent as Homo sapiens, so they wasn't actively engaged in trying to destroy each other. Instead, they diverged to fit into their own ecological niches, so they didn't have to compete with each other for food. Right? That's what happened. But humans operate at the global scale, so there was no niche at the global scale. The whole planet is our planet, right? So every resource was fought and competed against by Homo sapien. There's no intelligent, what I call Homo simian. There is no intelligent Homo simian right now in the present, because Homo simian and Homo sapien warred, and Homo sapien won. Like simians never reached high levels of intelligence because we warred and wiped them out. And this does another very important thing. It explains why Homo sapien is the only intelligent animal on the planet, because every other animal that tried to evolve intelligence was wiped out by Homo sapien. So as intelligence continued to grow and evolve, whenever it was confronted with Homo sapien, it was wiped out and destroyed. And since we were the first species to settle and domesticate, we were able to stabilize our ability to maintain our hold over we were able to maintain our hold over the monopoly of intelligence as a resource and the evolution of life on the planet. Our very specific type of intelligence is unique and inherent to us because we don't share it with any other animal. It's the one resource we don't share. You can go over there and you can eat apples, you can go over there and eat pears, whatever, like we don't care. You can eat grass, that's fine. You can swim in water, that's okay. You can have the oceans. But when it comes to being the most intelligent animal on the planet, we didn't allow anything else to evolve more intelligence than us. Anything that had enough intelligence to directly compete with us, was wiped out. Just wiped out. Just indiscriminately gone. You nope. Intelligence is our thing. So that's basically what happened. And we're not talking about intelligence is our thing because Europeans were evolving over here as a species, and Asians were evolving over here as a species, and Africans were evolving over here as a species, and islanders were doing everything in the islands. No. Homo sapien was running around the world making sure that they were breeding all of the women and all of the men were all breeding together and making sure that we were one giant continuous family on a global scale. When Christopher Columbus sailed to America, they bred with the Native Americans because they were still human. There is no other. There's one global human species, and that's just Homo sapien. Homo sapien evolved as a divergent branch from simians. Sapient and simians. They emerged from a divergent branch, and that branch evolved as a biped from rodents. And that's pretty much what I'm working on. That's the premise that I'm drawing from. So when I have time between all of the other struggles that I got going on, I will upload it. And yes, Europeans are Africans too. There's a difference between there's ethnicity, nationality, and there was a third one. Ethnicity, nationality, and leadership. Those are the three axioms that I'm designing for the Michelson system. Africans, Asians, Africans, Negroid, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Islander, and then you have Europeans, Asians. These are nations: European, Asians. African, European, Asian, and Islanders. There's another word for it. And then the leaders. The leaders are kings and queens, emperors and empresses, pharaohs and Fionas, and the Islanders have a very unique name for themselves. I just defined them. That's why it's not off the top of my head. But I'm working on it. I've got it coming down the pipeline. So. I'm just reading through the comments, see if there's anything. The gene of black and brown skin and eyes. I don't know specifically what the gene is, but there is one. I know that melatonin. That's another thing about another misconception about pigmentation in humans. Pigmentation is controlled by Pigmentation in humans is melanin, and melanin is controlled by melanocytes. I'm probably saying that wrong. For every human being, the total number of melanocytes, the genes that can, the mechanisms in the skin that create pigment, is the same. What differs between ethnicity is their activity. Some For Africans, they're very active and they respond very quickly and very rapidly to diminishing light sources. And for lighter skinned individuals, it's the opposite. But the total number of them in each person's skin is the same number. It doesn't vary. How does this help? How does the information help us in our daily lives? How can I apply this? The best way that it helps is with the fundamental understanding of the level of equality that actually exists. If someone's trying to convince you of something that's not true and you have the correct answer, then you don't have to feel misled or have an incorrect perception of yourself. You can't make good decisions. If you don't, Terrence Howard thinks 1 times 1 equals 1 as a type of misunderstanding or a misconception. If you have the correct data, you don't make those kind of errors. If he wants 1 times 1 to equal 1, he has to create his own axiom and his own proofs, which is what I'm doing. You have to create your own consistency. You have to create your own consistencies of understanding for something to be acceptable as a proof and a value that can be passed to someone else. Otherwise, you're just wrong. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong, but making mistakes and being wrong and being in error is not compatible with truth, right? You're either right or you're wrong, or you don't take a position to where you have to validate yourself based on those principles. And that's pretty much it. So I've got a lot of stuff I have to get done. So as always, my name is Paul Emerson. I've given you my 2 cents.